वाहिनी अमृतानंद प्रवाहिनी सुधामयी दयामयी दमयन्दिनी नमो नमः सुधामयी दयामयी दमयन्दिनी नमो नमः अमृत भारत माँ जय जय अमल भारत माँ जय जय हरित भारत माँ जय जय पुण्य भारत माँ अमृत भारत माँ जय जय अमल भारत माँ जय जय हरित भारत माँ जय जय अम्मा श्रीमाता स्वरूपिणी श्रीमाता स्वरूपिणी श्रीमाता स्वरूपिणी श्रीनाथ सुवासिनी श्रीमाता स्वरूपिणी श्रीनाथ सुवासिनी श्रीमंगलदायिनी श्रीरागविलासिनी श्री
Namaskar all. For those who are standing at the back and not yet seated, please do take your seats shortly. We will soon start. Thank you.
Give your hands away in service. Let your feet rush to the needy. Let your heart take wings. Give yourself to the world. Crossing nations and seas. Giving love to the foreign. Crossing nations and seas. Giving love to the crying. Calling out to the world. Calling out to the world. Yeah, yeah.
सहवीर्यं करवावहै सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सहवीर्यं करवावहै. The joy of giving, feel the rhythm of love. The joy of giving and the power of us. The joy of giving is the rhythm of love and the joy of giving. The blue said there ain't nothing but the truth. The blue said there your love is the truth. The blue said there you gotta believe in the truth of love that's gonna break the walls. Sahana bhavatu, sahana bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai. Sahana bhavatu, sahana bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai.
Live in unity with nature. Heal the wounds we have afflicted. Care for every form of life. Give your heart to the world. Crossing nations and seas. Giving love to the foreign. Crossing nations and seas. Giving love to the crying. Calling out to the world. Calling out to the world. Yeah, yeah.
सहवीर्यं करवावहै सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सहवीर्यं करवावहै. The joy of giving, feel the rhythm of love. The joy of giving and the power of us. The joy of giving is the rhythm of love and the joy of giving. The blue said there ain't nothing but the truth. The blue said there that love is the truth. The blue said there you gotta believe in the truth of love that's gonna break the walls. through the ocean so unknown. You know you need someone to hold on to the light. Don't leave me. ശ്വാസം തന്നെ രക്ഷിക്കൂ ജഗദംബേ ജഗദംബേ.
ഞാനിവിടേക്ക് നടന്നാലും നിന്നിലേക്ക് എത്താനുള്ള പാതയെന്ന ബോധം ഉണ്ടാകണേ ഉണ്ടാകണേ ഏതു വാക്കും നിന്റെ വാക്കാക്കണേ എന്റെ ഏത് ഇച്ഛയും നിന്റെ ഇച്ഛയാക്കണേ എന്റെ ഏതു കർമ്മവും നിന്റെ കർമ്മമാക്കി മാറ്റണേ. ഞാനെന്ത് ഭുജിച്ചാലും അവിടുത്തേക്കുള്ള യജ്ഞമാക്കി മാറ്റണേ. ഞാനെവിടെ ശയിച്ചാലും അവിടുത്തേക്കുള്ള നമസ്കാരമായി മാറ്റണേ. മാറ്റണേ അമ്മ. ജഗദംബേ പ്രേമം താ ജഗദംബേ ഭക്തി താ ജഗദംബേ.
We are delighted to welcome everyone to the event today. That is, all who are online watching from different corners of the world, our esteemed panelists, and the audience in the room. Welcome. Today's panel, hosted by the MA Centre UK, is on raising resilience, mental health strategies for a modern world, and is part of the C20 Integrated Holistic Health Working Group. Mental health is a vast topic. In a non-stop world, it is a 24-hour conversation which is rightfully gaining increased exposure. Despite this, not enough is being done to address this severe and debilitating illness. Because for each one of the estimated 1 in 4 that will suffer from mental health issues, it has a unique characteristic, one of stigma, embarrassment. It is an illness which is not always received with kindness, and to those suffering, compassion within themselves, from institutions and others, can be hard to find. With this in mind, we know we will not be able to address the many facets and needs of mental health today. But what we will do is dig deep and offer a way forward. C20 engagement groups voice the primary concerns and aspirations of everyday people to G20 world leaders. The goal is to promote social and economic development with the vision of leaving no one behind. India will host the G20 World Summit this September. And in the build-up to this, global events are taking place to inform the final policy recommendations made to G20 leaders. Mata Amrita Nandamayi Devi, known as Amma, was appointed chair of the C20 by the esteemed Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. It has been a privilege to witness so many global working groups bringing difficult mainstream topics to the forefront, and it is an equal honour for the MA Centre Bromley to have been chosen as the venue to host today's panel. As the C20 is about each one of us embodying the light, and as is customary in Indian tradition, I invite Swami Subramanitananda, with the Honourable Member of Parliament and our panellists, to step forward and light our lamps, an act which is symbolic of each of us being a source of light and absorbing its brilliance. Please step forward. We will now watch a short video on the C20 initiative.
Civil 20, India 2023 envisions a conception of civil society 2.0 in a world where individual, family, society, market, and state can understand their respective roles better and supplement each other rather than engaging in conflicts. This year, the C20 symbolizes the flame of hope, self-motivation, and selfless service.
Amma is grateful to the Indian government for arranging such a high-quality meeting. All the issues raised here are vitally important. This should go beyond a mere physical meeting and become a true meeting, a meeting of hearts and minds. This is the only way to awaken ourselves and others.
This year, C20 working groups will focus on integrated holistic health, mind, body, and environment. Sustainable and resilient communities, climate, environment, and net zero targets. Education and digital transformation. Gender equality and disability. Technology, security, and transparency. Lifestyle for environment. Preservation and conservation of traditional arts, crafts, and culture. Human rights as human values. Revival of rivers and water management. Seva, sense of service, philanthropy, and volunteerism. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. Diversity, inclusion, and mutual respect. SDG 16 and promoting civic space. Delivering democracy through participatory governance.
Before I ask him to say a few words, I'd like to take a moment and express our gratitude to Bob Stewart, MP for Beckenham since 2010, for taking time out of his Sunday, a very sunny one, to be here with us today. Your commitment to your constituency is unwavering, Bob, and we are pleased to have you with us today. Do come forward to share a few opening remarks.
Hello everyone, it's really lovely to be here. I did prepare a few things to say. This C20 is terribly, terribly important. I can't tell you how important I think the problem of mental health is. It has always been the case. It's always been there. We just haven't recognized it. And we're increasingly recognizing it. When I was a little boy at school, my schoolmasters we just used to think they were batty, mad. But they were all officers from the Second World War. And it may well have been that they had severe mental problems after what they had seen. All of us have seen people in the street who look strange, behave weirdly, even seem threatening. And now, me, when I look at them, I'm thinking, how can we help this person? Because actually, they're just like you and I. They've just had a bit of bad luck, or, a human situation. And that's what this is all about. Politically, of course, in the National Health Service, we haven't done enough for mental health. We just haven't. There's growing recognition of that, but then the question is, I won't go into politics because it's not a time for politics, but if you're going to give more to mental health, where's it going to come from? It's always a difficult problem, always a difficult problem. But what we can do individually is help where we can. All of us in our families and our friends have probably got people who we think might require a little bit of help. My own family, most definitely. My wife thinks I need a hell of a lot of help. Of course, as a military officer for 28 years, I saw a lot of horrific things. Too horrific for me to go into detail here. But the impact on myself and my soldiers and my officers is there. All of us, whatever we do, what we see, what we experience, influences how we are. I had officers and soldiers that seemed to go, in our terms then, mad. Weren't mad. They just had enough. And we needed to look after them. I personally think that probably all my men and I suffer from some form of mental problem. To a lesser or greater extent. I was talking to one of my officers only last week, and he said, I think you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. I said, rubbish. Of course I bloody well haven't. And he said, well, denial is also one of the symptoms, But seriously, it's not just what we see and but some people may well be born with a problem, And I think this sort of gathering, your sort of input to the C20 process is terribly, terribly important. I was going to stay here a short time because I've got other things to do today. But to hell with that. I'll stay longer. Because it's really a great thing what you're all doing here. And if I have a message, I don't have a message, I can't tell anyone to do anything. Who am I? I'm just a human being. I think we all collectively would think, perhaps we should do more for people who might need help. I think I've said enough. Can't think of anything else to say, otherwise I get tearful. So thank you very much.
Mother Amnitanandamayi Devi, as previously mentioned, known as Amma, is the chairperson of the C20 engagement group. Her compassion has reached and continues to extend to all parts of the globe. She spreads light and love through her actions, her presence with everyday people, and all of her worldwide life-changing projects. Small examples of her incredible work includes free medical care for 4.7 million people, worldwide disaster relief worldwide disaster relief initiatives worth £60 million, self-help programs for approximately 200,000 women. And she has provided more than 47,000 homes for the homeless. These, though, are just a few examples of her incredible work. We will now watch a short message from Amma.
സ്വരൂകളും ആത്മസ്വരൂകളായിരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഇതൊരു ശുഭമുഹൂർത്തമാണ്. ലോകത്തിൻ്റെ മങ്ങുന്ന തേജസ് വീണ്ടെടുക്കാനുള്ള ശ്രമത്തിന് നമ്മൾ തുടക്കം കുറിച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു. G20 അധ്യക്ഷത ഭാരതത്തിന് ലഭിച്ച ചരിത്രപ്രധാനമായ അവസരമാണിത്. G20 ഭാഗമായ G20 പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ വിജയകരമാക്കുക എന്ന വലിയ ഉത്തരവാദിത്തമാണ് ഭാരത സർക്കാരും പ്രധാനമന്ത്രി ശ്രീ നരേന്ദ്രമോദിയും നമ്മളെ ഏൽപ്പിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഈ സംരംഭത്തോട് അങ്ങേയറ്റം നീതി പുലർത്താൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയട്ടെ. ഭാരത സർക്കാരിനോടും പ്രധാനമന്ത്രിയോടും ഈ അവസരത്തിൽ അകമഴിഞ്ഞ കൃതജ്ഞത രേഖപ്പെടുത്തുന്നു. സമഗ്രമായ ആരോഗ്യപരിപാലനം, ലിംഗസമത്വം, സാങ്കേതിക ശാസ്ത്രം ഇവയൊക്കെ C20 പ്രവർത്തന പദ്ധതിയിലുണ്ടെന്ന് അമ്മ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നു. ഇന്ന് പൊതുവെ മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ ആരോഗ്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള പലരുടെയും സങ്കല്പം ശരീരത്തിൻ്റെ തലത്തിൽ മാത്രം ഒതുങ്ങുന്നു. മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ നിലനിൽപ്പ് ശരീരത്തിൽ മാത്രം ഒതുങ്ങുന്നില്ല. മനസ്സിൻ്റെയും ബുദ്ധിയുടെയും വികാരങ്ങളുടെയും ആരോഗ്യവും പരമപ്രധാനമാണ്. അതിലുപരി സകലരും ചൈതന്യം പകരുന്ന ഏകമായ ആത്മശക്തി അംഗീകരിക്കുകയും വേണം. ഇവയെല്ലാം തുല്യമായി പരിഗണിച്ച് പരിപാലിക്കുമ്പോഴാണ് ആരോഗ്യ സംരക്ഷണത്തിൻ്റെ അർത്ഥം പൂർണ്ണമാകുന്നത്. ആധുനിക വൈദ്യശാസ്ത്രത്തിനും ചികിത്സാ സമ്പ്രദായങ്ങൾക്കും തീർച്ചയായും അതിൻ്റെതായ സ്ഥാനവും പ്രാധാന്യമുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ രോഗം വരുമ്പോൾ മാത്രം ചികിത്സ തേടുന്നതിലല്ല ശരിയായ ആരോഗ്യ സംരക്ഷണം. യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ പ്രകൃതിയാണ് നമ്മുടെ ഉറ്റ മിത്രം. കാരണം നമ്മൾ പ്രകൃതി തന്നെയാണ്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ആരോഗ്യ സംരക്ഷണം പൂർണ്ണമാകാൻ പ്രകൃതിയുമായി സുരക്ഷിതം നീങ്ങേണ്ടത് ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനമാണ്. ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾ തന്നെ ആളുകൾ വേസ്റ്റ് ഇടുന്നെടുത്ത് മണ്ണെടുത്ത് നോക്കി മൊത്തം പോയിസണായിരുന്നു. അവിടെ വൃക്ഷം നട്ട് വളർത്തി. അതൊരു 3 വർഷം കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ ആ മണ്ണെടുത്ത് റിസർച്ച് ചെയ്തപ്പോൾ വിഷമേ ഇല്ല. വേരെത്ര വിഷം പിടിച്ചെടുത്തു. ഇലകൾ നമ്മൾ കാർബണത്തെ എടുത്ത് നമുക്ക് നല്ല ശുദ്ധവായു തരുന്നു. വൃക്ഷത്തെ ഈശ്വരനെപ്പോലെ ആരാധിച്ചിരുന്ന പഴയ ആൾക്കാർ. നമ്മളൊക്കെ ഒരു വൃക്ഷം വെട്ടുമ്പം പൂജിച്ച് മാപ്പ് വെച്ചിട്ട് വെട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. അങ്ങനെ ഓരോ ജീവജാലങ്ങളെയും അന്ന് നമ്മൾ ആരാധിച്ചത് തന്നതിനുള്ള നന്ദി കാണിച്ചതാണ്. അപ്പം നമ്മളതൊരു പ്രാകൃതമല്ലാത്ത പ്രായോഗികമായിരുന്നു. അവിടത്തേക്ക് നമ്മൾ തിരിച്ച് കുറച്ചെങ്കിലും പോയേ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. പണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ഗ്രാമത്തിൽ എൻ്റെ കുഞ്ഞിൽ 60 വർഷം മുമ്പ് കൈക്കരി മുറിവെല്ലാം പറ്റിയാൽ നമ്മൾ ചാണകം എടുത്ത് വെച്ച് മുറിവ് പൊറുക്കും. ഇന്നത്തെ പശുക്കളുടെ ചാണകം തട്ടിയ സെപ്റ്റിക്കാവും. ഒരു കാര്യം വ്യക്തമാണ്, ഇന്ന് മാനവരാശി നേരിട്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നതും സംഭവിക്കാനിരിക്കുന്നതുമായ അനർത്ഥങ്ങൾക്ക് ശാശ്വതമായ പരിഹാരം ഉണ്ടാകണമെങ്കിൽ മനുഷ്യനവൻ്റെ ആന്തരികമായ കാലാവസ്ഥയ്ക്ക് കൂടി മാറ്റം വരുത്താൻ തയ്യാറാണ്. കാരണം ബാഹ്യമായി സംഭവിക്കുന്ന ആഗോളതാപനവും കാലാവസ്ഥ വ്യതിയാനവും മനുഷ്യൻ അവൻ്റെ മനസ്സ് സൃഷ്ടിക്കുന്ന ദുഷിച്ച കാലാവസ്ഥയുടെ പ്രതിഫലനമാണ്. നമുക്കെല്ലാം ഒരേ മനസ്സോടെ ഒരേ ലക്ഷ്യത്തോടെ ലോക നന്മയ്ക്ക് വേണ്ടി നിസ്വാർത്ഥമായി പ്രവർത്തിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിയും. നമ്മളെ പിന്തുടർന്നു വരുന്നവർക്ക് നമ്മുടെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ ശ്രേഷ്ഠമായ ഒരു മാതൃകയായി തീരും. നമ്മുടെ ജീവിത വൃക്ഷം സ്നേഹമാകുന്ന മണ്ണിൽ ഉറച്ചു നിർത്തട്ടെ. സത്കർമ്മങ്ങളാകട്ടെ അതിലെ ഇലകൾ, അനുകമ്പാപൂർണമായ വാക്കാകട്ടെ അതിലെ പുഷ്പങ്ങൾ, ശാന്തിയാകട്ടെ അതിലെ ഫലങ്ങൾ. സ്നേഹത്തിൽ ഒന്നായി തീർന്ന് ഒരു കുടുംബമായി ലോകം വളർന്ന് വികസിക്കും. വസുദൈവ കുടുംബം എന്ന ഈ വാക്ക് പ്രാവർത്തികമാക്കി എല്ലാവരും ഉണർന്ന് ഫലവത്താക്കാനും നമുക്ക് കഴിയട്ടെ. അങ്ങനെ ശാന്തിയും സമാധാനവും കളിയാടുന്ന ഒരു ലോകം നമുക്കെല്ലാം സാഹിത്യമാകട്ടെ. കൃപ നമ്മളെ എല്ലാം അനുഗ്രഹിക്കട്ടെ.
The coordinator of the IHH group, Integrated Holistic Health, Dr. Priya, unfortunately could not be here in London at such short notice. But via the wonders of modern technology and live links, she is able to join us from India. And we now invite her to share her insights on this working group.
So hi everybody, good morning from India. I hope that I'm audible. I don't want to bore anybody with a whole bunch of slides, but I think I want to take this opportunity to briefly take you through what we have experienced from C20 Integrated Holistic Health. Before I start, I first want to express my sincere gratitude to Member of Parliament Bob Stewart for being here, for joining us, for sharing your words of wisdom and your experience with us. I also want to thank all the other dignitaries who've joined us today. Councillor Dr. Manju Shahul Hamid, Emma Kenny, Dr. Rajiv Dhar, Kamal Bodnekar, Dr. Hannah Morgan, and each and every one of you who've joined us here today. All of you are embodiments of divine light. You are inspiration to everyone. So I'm going to share my slides. And I hope that this is visible. So I have had the incredible honor of being a coordinator for the C20 Working Group on Integrated Holistic Health. Yeah, mind, body, and environment. We are essentially, C20 is a group of civil society organizations that come together along with academicians and people from all over the world to discuss issues in public health and hopefully come up with not only suggestions for governments, but also suggestions for us to be able to enhance the quality of healthcare that reaches the common man. So when we started this working group in January of this year, the past 2-3 years have all been focused on COVID, and we wanted to step out of that. So we had come up with these key areas: mental health, reduction of non-communicable diseases, elderly care, nutrition, holistic health and forms of traditional medicine, women's and children's health, and the concept of One Health, or the interrelationship between human, animals, and environment. So our chair of C20, Srimata Amritandamayi Devi, as was already described before, you already read her message. So one of the key areas that she had been emphasizing was that every single living being in creation is interdependent, and the rhythm of nature, the rhythm of our environment, depends upon the rhythm of each and every living being's mind, body, and soul. And this is of key importance to really ensure positive health. Now, if you look at the concept of health over time, over the past 100, 200 years, we have massively expanded the term health from the individual to initially public health, which focused on the immediate society of a human being. The world gradually became smaller, and then we thought that health was dependent upon human health all over the world. Gradually, we started to understand that our health was interdependent not only with humans as a species, but with animals as well. And now we have reached the concept of planetary health, wherein we recognize that human health is interdependent not only on the health of all living beings in creation, but also on our air, our water, soil quality, and every other aspect of nature. But where we hoped to go through C20 this year was to understand that while it is of extreme importance to keep looking externally and widening our concept of health, it was equally important to turn inwards and recognize that without aspects of mental health, emotional health, spiritual resilience, true health is still not achievable. So that is kind of where we started off in January. And the response has been really inspiring. It's been frankly incredible. We've had more than 1,040 organizations join us in these massive discussions that have been taking place over the past 5 months, spanning over 84 countries through the world. And this is the map. I think we added a few more countries recently, but this is just to show the extent of the involvement of discussion globally. We started out by just an invitation and a call out to everybody. Then we went through a process of learning the work that's being done by civil society organizations and even just individuals. And I have to say, it's been a very humbling experience to just see the extent of really good and selfless work. And I think if for nothing else, C20 has been an incredible platform for us to be able to showcase people who really are trying their best in their own individual ways to do good for their society. After that, we had a series of online policy brainstorming events wherein we discussed key problems in the area in all of these different 7 areas, and we tried to brainstorm based on CSO experience what would be the best way in individual communities to enhance public health. We had a very democratic process wherein we had voting for top issues, key issues, which was really exciting. It was a very fun and engaging process. And this culminated in a large summit wherein we had more than 450 people attend in person with more than 1,000 people online. This was held in Delhi to a month and a half ago. We had health ministers from various states come. We had from various countries join us. We had CSO representatives from all over the world. And we not only had larger discussions and panel discussions, but we also had smaller sessions wherein we really started to write up our documents, which would be submitted at the Leadership Summit in Delhi later this year. Now, one of the overwhelming discussion topics are basically priority areas that each and every person, whether they were from the government sector or from the civil society sector, everybody emphasized the importance of talking about mental health. As some of you might know, the World Health Organization had created a special initiative for mental health, which was to end actually this year, wherein the goal was by 2023 that we would achieve universal health coverage for mental health in 12 priority countries, and hopefully more than 100 million people would have access to quality mental health care. While we are racing towards this goal, unfortunately, there's still a lot to be achieved, a lot to be reached. We have not reached these targets. And I think that part of the reason, which is why I think it's so important to have meetings like the one we're having today, is that it doesn't, though it is important to enhance healthcare facilities for mental health, there's so much stigma, there's so much lack of awareness, there's so much shame to discuss issues and open up about our own mental health and mental health in our own families, that even if you provide healthcare facilities, people don't utilize them and people don't have access to them. So based on our discussions, the key areas we wanted to put up as a suggestion or a push from civil society are, number one, the need to advocate national mental health programs. It's sad to say that still less than 40% of the countries in the world only have national mental health programs. 60% still don't. We also aim to push for international digital platforms for streamlining healthcare processes, especially when it comes to non-communicable diseases. And we also want to emphasize the importance of antimicrobial resistance. But still, I think our biggest push is on mental health. And I know you're going to have panel discussions with experts in the area, but I just wanted to take a moment before I end to share what we have come up with so far. The first policy as per se that we want to push is that it is so important to incorporate and integrate mental health education programs in national school curricula internationally, everywhere by 2025. Because if we don't talk about it, we're never going to be able to enhance our mental wellness. The second is to provide community and institutional mental health training with specific emphasis on promoting suicide awareness and prevention. Only 20% of countries in the world have a suicide helpline, and a majority of countries, especially those with lower and middle income countries like in the East and the Southern, the global South, they do not have any support system for suicide. And the statistics are shocking. Every 40 seconds, someone takes their life. So this has become a pandemic far worse than COVID ever was. And we need to be able to raise the global awareness on that. And the last is to establish very strong public and private partnerships to develop evidence-based mental health programs that can promote knowledge and mind-strengthening life skills, promoting mental resilience. And I think that that's something that will be discussed in detail today, is not only about tackling mental illness, but also about ways to prevent mental illness by strengthening mental resilience. We had this fantastic campaign, which you will probably hear about today, which was called the 999 Challenge, wherein we challenge people to practice just 9 minutes of meditation with 9 rounds of yoga, Surya Namaskaram or yoga, for 9 days, just 9 days, and then share their experience of how they felt before and after. And it's incredible to see just 9 minutes of centering yourself and taking a moment to be in the present and be silent. Even that promotes wellness in an incredible way. So we want to be able to bring that discussion to a governmental level and hopefully internationally as well. And I think that more than this discussion of policy alone is just to even recognize that, like our tagline is, like the tagline was given by Amma, we are the light. Like Bob had mentioned earlier, each one of us are responsible to make that change in our communities. And I hope that all of us here, by discussing it, we can be inspired to be the change. Amma says that we can't wait for the world to change. When we change, the world is forced to change in our footsteps. So I hope that this program will inspire all of us to be champions for mental health in our communities. So thank you so much to the organizers. Thank you so much to all of you who have joined us. And I hope that this becomes another source of light to the world. So thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Priya. This leads nicely on to our last short video showcasing the work done by the Integrated Holistic Health Working Group.
This year, the C20 Integrated Holistic Health Working Group will comprise 7 subgroups with areas of focus that include mental health, nutrition, women's and children's health, elderly care, holistic health including traditional medicine like Ayurveda, as well as yoga and meditation, the reduction of non-communicable diseases, and One Health, a concept that highlights the interdependence of human, animal, and environmental health as one species, one world. Delving into these themes, we aim to widen the discussions on different facets of Sustainable Development Goal 3, good health and well-being, with policy building meetings and series of public webinars and awareness campaigns that will take place throughout 2023. These discussions will bring together health professionals, educators, and leaders from across the public health landscape to formulate policies that support global health and well-being. Inspired by the humanitarian activities of Amma, Shri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, the present chair of C20, we hope that this upcoming series of events will raise the general awareness in society and spark interest in people to contribute to the conversation surrounding global health. As we embark on this journey to understand the health of the world around us, C20 will offer all members of civil society an opportunity to recognize how our individual experiences and efforts can lead to policy change. Let's work together to create a healthier, more equitable world. Good health is a fundamental human right, and it's up to all of us to make it a reality for everyone.
As the final part of this welcome address, we are privileged to have Swami Shubham Nityananda here with us today. Swami is one of Amma's most senior disciples. He's Chief Coordinator of the organisational activities in the UK, Europe, Africa, and parts of the Middle East. A wonderful and gifted speaker, he travels the world sharing Amma's teachings, delivering workshops on stress and life management, and deepening techniques of meditation and wholeness. Swamiji, before the panel joins the stage, please do come forward to share a few words on today's topic.
Om Amriteshwariye Namaha. Honorable Member of Parliament, Bob Stewart, distinguished members from the panel today, Councillor Dr. Manju Shahul, Amma Kenny, Dr. Rajiv Dhar, Kamal Bodhankar, Dr. Hannah Morgan, and dear sisters and brothers. I'm extremely happy to be here for this C20 event on mental health, raising resilience, mental health strategies for the modern world. We all heard Dr. Priya give us the statistics, which really shows the distressing decline in mental health that affects every aspect of our lives. From the pressures of modern living to the excessive use of digital technologies, to social determinants like poverty, discrimination, violence, or lack of human connection, physical health problems, family history, numerous factors contribute to mental health issues. I am stressed, I am depressed. These are common phrases that we hear in conversations nowadays. And it is across all age groups. During my travels, when I am asked the question at the immigration, what is the purpose of your visit? I normally say I'm conducting a workshop on stress management. And 90% of the time, the immigration officer has said to me, really? Please take a session here. It really shows how much people are seeking true relaxation in life. We are all taught the basic importance of body hygiene, dental hygiene very early in life. But what about our psychological hygiene? Are we taught how to keep the mind healthy and strong? No. We get psychological injuries more than physical injuries, right? There is failure, there is rejection, there is loneliness. Yet, we are not equipped with the toolkit as how to process them or treat them. And they cause great harm if they are left unattended. And as Dr. Priya mentioned, every 40 seconds, there is somebody, giving up their life, committing suicide. In the UK, I was looking at the statistics, over 8 million people are experiencing an anxiety disorder at any time. 8 million. Each country has been observing the steep climb in cases of mental health disorders. A person once said to me, at home, instead of putting the sign, do not disturb, I have a sign saying, already disturbed, proceed with caution. As mental health declines, so does our resilience, as they always go hand in hand. Resilience is the ability to bounce back when put down by hardships. It is the ability to adapt to changes, heal emotionally, and move ahead in life. I read an interesting quote. Resilience is setback that did its homework, learned its lesson, and decided to move forward. Amma puts it beautifully. She says, in the boxing ring, just because one fighter gets knocked down doesn't mean that he has lost the match. It's only if he cannot get back on his feet in time that he is declared the loser. It's not just by falling that one is losing the match. It is the same in life. Setbacks do not define us. They do not make someone a failure. Losing resilience, it does really lead to this kind of a failure in life. As the mental strength declines, it leaves very little energy for one to bounce back. Clinicians and researchers are starting to sense the importance of focusing on this issue by teaching methods to enhance resilience rather than continually focusing on or examining the negative consequences of trauma or stress. This is an important shift to pay attention to because it signifies a move away from the purely deficit-based model of mental health towards inclusion of strength and competency-based models. This allows greater focus on prevention and building strengths in addition to addressing psychopathology. We'll be listening to our eminent panelists today who will be talking on this topic in a much deeper way. I am not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but I would just like to share some thoughts on this topic that I learned from my master, the world-renowned humanitarian and spiritual leader Amma. We have seen what Amma gives to the world, accessible to one and all, people from all walks of life and all parts of the globe. She allows each and every person to come and meet her, unburden their sorrows and struggles. With her patient listening, profound wisdom, and boundless compassion, she has helped millions of people to find access to their inner strength and to be resilient and motivated in life. Her life is a great testimony to the fact that the greatest healing therapy is unconditional love. It cannot be anything more healing than that. Embracing the world, it really works in mental health in a very multifaceted way. There is medical care, there's counseling services that we provide, and also there is the work of propagating the knowledge of meditation and yoga worldwide, which has brought strength and stability to so many lives. I would like to mention 4 factors as the ABCD of mental health and resilience strategy. A, awareness is a must. B, beware of negative thinking and self-talk. C, cultivate a practice. And D, develop a support group. Coming to the A, let us start with awareness. A very common expression that we hear from people is that suddenly one day I had a breakdown and I was taken aback. It all happened suddenly one day. Any kind of mental breakdown is not sudden, but it's a gradual buildup that we are not aware of. Maybe a person or an event becomes a trigger, but the real reason is a lack of mental health that we have overlooked. We all know, along with the fast pace of the world, the mind has also become very fast-paced. But if we do not know how to stop the mind, we are in trouble. If you only know how to drive it fast, but you don't know how to stop a vehicle, you're in trouble, right? It's the same. Hence, we need to go slow at times, otherwise it could lead to a burnout. If we are facing an adversity in life, again we need to slow down, as we will not process things well in haste. Going slow doesn't mean acting slow or becoming less effective. It means becoming more aware, creating a space within and seeing things from a distance. Hence, awareness to introspect and clearly understand what is happening within us is extremely important. It means finding meaningful answers to questions like, where is my life going? Am I happy with what I'm doing in life? It means reassessing our priorities and resetting them and aligning one's life to higher purpose. Without finding answers for this, we may be traveling fast, but we may be traveling in circles. Going slow also means setting oneself on even ground after a stressful event that has happened. It is a very important step in building resilience. Coming to the second, beware negative thinking and self-talk. The majority of us, we have a default set of feelings and beliefs that get activated when we experience a setback in life. These feelings or thoughts are not always positive in nature, right? Just to give you an example, suppose there's a youngster who is full of expectations to clear a dream job interview. And during the interview, the interviewer says, "Sorry, we don't find your resume interesting enough. You may leave." The youngster is shattered. He calls his friend to explain what happened. And the friend says, "Of course they were right. Who will invest in a person like you with such limited skills and with such self-confidence? Nobody is going to do that. They were absolutely right." Now, what will you call such a person? A cruel person, right? Who would say this when somebody is calling to hear some words of consolation. Now, suppose there is no friend, and it is your own mind saying this to you. This is what happens most of the time, right? Our mind keeps telling us all these things. We are already hurting due to a rejection, and we have made it worse due to our negative thinking. We never aggravate a physical injury that we have, but we do it with our mental injuries all the time, with our negative thinking. That's why it's important to treat ourselves with compassion in the same way we expect a good friend to treat us. When we put ourselves down all the time, after a while our subconscious mind, it starts believing it. And then you find it very hard to rise up. Let us not allow ourselves to get caught in this negative thinking, negative self-talk. Now, one may say, even after thinking positively, don't negative things happen in life? They do happen. Because all happenings, it depends on a number of factors. But there is one thing we need to understand. Positive thinking does not guarantee success, but negative thinking guarantees failure. That's the difference. Let us be positive storytellers of our own story. We need to reflect on our lives and recollect those moments when we were resilient and we could face challenges successfully, because we forget such experiences easily. That can really help us kindle strength and resilience within. Let us edit our life story properly, giving more prominence to the positive experiences that have happened in our life. Coming to the third, we need to cultivate healthy practices. Building resilience involves self-care practices that nurture our mental health. We also, in the video, practicing meditation, yoga, relaxation techniques, seeking social connections with right people, right-minded people, spending time in nature. All these are vital components of self-care. And research findings, they really show that through this, our resilience can really grow, because resilience is part of nature and nurture. For some, this trait would naturally be there. We find them so automatically resilient to every situation, but it can be developed as well. A good example is a guitar player. When you start trying to play guitar, your fingers get very sore, right? And some get very frustrated and give up after 2 or 3 lessons. But if you persevere, your fingers get stronger. And then pretty soon the whole process becomes effortless and even enjoyable. What it shows us is that resilience is a character trait and strength that can be learned to a great, this is the strength that can be developed to a great extent through practice. What does practice do? It helps us discover the source of strength within. And once you know that strength, you can rely on it, use it to bounce back when adversities come in life. External circumstances they really lose their strength to diminish, external situations, they lose their strength to diminish your inner strength and peace. There's a very beautiful saying of Amma. She says, for the physical health to improve, the body should move. Isn't it? For the health to improve, the body should move. For the mental health to improve, the mind should not move. More still the mind, more better is the mental health. So as we become more silent through our practices, the strength that we carry within, it becomes more revealed. Let me share a short incident with you. It was a stockbroker who is to come to meet Amma, and after meeting Amma, he started practicing meditation. One day when he was near Amma, Amma asked him, how is your business going? And he smiled and said, Amma, there was a sudden crash in the stock market and I lost a few millions. So Amma spoke to him, asked him to come by the side. He sat there and started meditating. As I was translating, I looked at this guy, and after saying such a thing, he was very coolly meditating. I remembered something I had read in the Reader's Digest about a stockbroker writing his story. He says there was a crash in the US stock market, and this person, along with many, had lost millions of dollars. And he thought, there is no way I can bounce back. So the only thing to do is to end my life. He left a suicide note, drove near the Manhattan Bridge. His plan was to jump into the water and end his life. And as he walked on the bridge, what did he find? There were 30 other people already, 30 other stockbrokers already there on the bridge to do so. And then he continues saying that he decided that he is not going to give up that easily, and he came back. Now, what do normally people do when they reach the end of the rope? They hang, right? But spiritual practices help us to hang on and not give up. I love these lines from Albert Camus. He says, in the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. No matter how the world pushes against me, within me there is something stronger, something better pushing right back. This is the source of strength that we can really experience through practice. Coming to the last, the D, we need to develop the right support group. Seeking help is not a weakness, it is also a sign of resilience. That I want to get back. It is important that we all try our best to nurture a support group of right-minded people who have our back and can inspire us to rise. I think spiritual communities play a great role in this. We all experienced it during the COVID times as to how much support such communities could give. In conclusion, the decline of mental health in society is a pressing crisis that demands urgent attention and action, as Honorable Bob Stewart just mentioned at the start of his speech. Mental health is not a given. It is something that we must tend to nurture by providing education and support, and we need to prioritize self-care. Let us work hand in hand as individuals and as organizations and as a global community to break all barriers, challenge the stigma, and create a world where mental health is given the right place, consideration, and care. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Swami. I will now invite Esther to play the piano as the stage is set for the panel. Now, turning to the terrific minds on our panel. Recognised as one of the UK's leading TV psychological experts, Emma Kenny is a TV presenter, writer and expert media commentator. Perhaps best known for her role as resident therapist and agony aunt on ITV's This Morning, where during the viewer phone-in segment of the show, she provides expert advice on a whole range of issues. She's also patron of a big mental health charity and trustee of SOS, Silence of Solitude. Emma has also emerged as a firm favourite for her presenting roles on true crime programmes, most notably Britain's Darkest Taboos on the Crime and Investigation channel. Her YouTube true crime series is becoming one of the most watched on the platform, with over 200,000 subscribers and 340,000 on Facebook. Emma kindly rearranged her busy schedule touring the UK with her hashtag true crime, hashtag the serial killer next door, and yes, that was a hashtag shout out, to be here with us in Bromley this morning before heading to Bournemouth to continue her UK tour. Thank you to you and your husband for rearranging your day, Emma. Dr. Manju Shahul Hamid is a councillor for the Broad Green Ward in Croydon. She has also held the past position of Mayor for Croydon and been the Cabinet Member for Community, Safety and Business Recovery. Manju founded a registered charity called MS Foundation for Mental Health, which offers free mental health related events in the community. She recently completed her PhD in Integration of Health and Social Care at the University of Greenwich. A few of you may remember that Councillor Manju joined the launch of our centre back in October 2019, and she continues to support our work here. Hot off the press, Manju has also been longlisted to be the parliamentary candidate in the next UK general election. Welcome, Manju. Dr. Rajiv Dar, our only male panelist, is a consultant psychiatrist in private practice in London, specialising in the assessment and treatment of mental health problems. He completed his medical training in London, is also a qualified barrister and holds an MBA. He has held various clinical and leadership roles in the NHS and private sector. This has included being a clinical director of general mental health services for a borough of London, and served as a board member for 7 years on NHS clinical commissioning boards. He is currently the psychiatry lead for the Cromwell Hospital Long COVID Clinic and has delivered over 100 presentations across various sectors, including multinational organisations. He has an interest in the development of treatment pathways and the future role of technology and AI. Kamal Bodhankar is the head of International Development for NASEN, which is the National Association for Specialist Education Needs, abbreviated to SEN. Research suggests that in 2022, SEN accounted for approximately 15.5% of children in the UK alone. NASEN is a remarkable charity that exists to support and champion those working with children and young people with learning difficulties. This is a charity who have their feet on the ground and their fingers on the technology. They are producing work that is actively contributing to the conversation and affecting change to improve the provision of services from the early years to young adults. Kamal, we know that it is the young who hold the planet in their hands and hearts, and we are looking forward to your input on inclusive mental health strategies that build resilience for all. And a very warm welcome to Kamal's young daughter as well, who's here in the audience. Dr. Hannah Morgan works as a child and educational psychologist. Having trained as both a primary teacher and psychologist, she has worked in schools and within the NHS for over 15 years. Dr. Morgan has a keen interest in child-parent relationships and in promoting positive emotional well-being within families and communities. She has developed courses for parents of young children and completed her doctoral research on how new parents develop a sense of self-efficiency. In her role with local authorities, Dr. Morgan enjoys helping schools to develop policies and strategies which support the mental health of their children and families. So, the moment we've all been waiting for. So, let's start with Emma. Emma, resilience. The Oxford Dictionary's definition of the word is the action or act of rebounding, of springing back, to rebound, to recoil. If we take a moment to look at the word in relation to mental health and your experience of working with people from across the globe, what are the definitive traits of being resilient, regardless of age and or culture, and your tips on developing resilience?
Gosh, how many hours have we got? I think that one of the most important things is the step before resilience. So the reality of knowing that you happen to the world doesn't happen to you. I think that particularly and predominantly in my experience of the Western world, there is an erosion of a sense of centre. People look externally, they want to belong in groups, and I understand that because clearly the effect of others has an impact on the way that we feel. But often the problem with that is the external gaze forgets the reality of what internal resilience is, which is knowing that firstly, sadly in life, we are not afforded happiness. That isn't something that is just given. Unfortunately, we suffer, but for some reason, we're afraid of it because it doesn't feel good. So we bring our children up in particular, and actually throughout our ages, with an expectation that if it doesn't feel good, then it should be abandoned, rejected, denied, avoided, self-medicated, usually in areas and with things that aren't good for us. Whereas if we started to actually talk about true resilience, which in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, comes from understanding that every single feeling is valid and every single experience has a potential lesson, and actually the best lessons come in suffering. To really understand that suffering has this wealth. Certainly in my own experience, I'm a daughter of suicide. My father killed himself. And if I were to genuinely express the most profound learning, the most humbling, the most truly connected, it would be through that experience. And if I were to do what so many people wish us to do, which is to move on, leave behind, do all the things that the Western model tells us is important, stroke essential, then I miss out on probably the most transcendentally transforming moments of my life. And the fact that agony can be incredibly beautiful. So when we talk about resilience, it isn't just about bounce back. Because before I bounce back, I have to know what it's like to stumble and fall. I have to know what it's like to experience shame, guilt, fear. I have to know that if I want to grow in courage, then you better give me something to be terrified of. I think we live in a world where we're trying to teach children that they are either successes or failures because of our system, the education system, for example. I think that we're here today to talk about resilience, and yet we're bringing in things like digitalization, which fundamentally, if we're to look at the connections and disconnections in our world and the fall in happiness, has definitely correlated with some of the things that we're so proud of talking about. And what I noticed in the videos, and I'm sure that everybody here did, is when Amma's talking, what she's talking about is to some degree a rejection of the very things that many of our leaders are pushing forward, and a reconnection with many of the things we've been told to leave behind. So my tips on resilience are, firstly, know there's going to be pain, and there should be, and that you should embrace it. If you want community, then before you can connect with it, you need to truly internally gaze and know who you are, because otherwise, how do you know your tribe? And then if you feel that life is hard, instead of believing that somehow you are having something very unfair bestowed on you, if you can instead gather that maybe your lessons are tougher, and maybe your life is more deeply ingrained with hardship, but maybe that's because you're going to grow in a more powerful and courageous manner and be the better human because of those feelings and thoughts and experiences, then that's, I think, where we start to really grow in resilience.
Thank you, Emma. That was indeed beautiful, and I'm sure many of us can relate to some of the topics you mentioned there. True resilience comes from courage, it seems, and without courage, where do we go? I think that leads us nicely to Councillor Manju. We know you set up a mental health charity a few years ago and are familiar with the stigma experienced from that. What key messages do cultures and communities, governments and institutions need to deliver to shatter the mental health stigma?
Thank you, Shalini, for that question on stigma. So I set up the mental health charity 6 years ago. It's a registered mental health charity, and the themes and the aims of the charity is to raise awareness of mental health and also eradicate stigma. So as a councillor and past mayor of Croydon, I get invited to community events. So when I go to events, people in the community, they'll approach me and say, they talk about their family members and close friends going through mental health issues. But because of the stigma, they have this reluctance in getting the proper treatment. And they also don't want me to do anything about it. They don't want me to take any actions, again, because of the stigma. So that was the reason for setting up this charity 6 years ago, to talk So they needed to have that in a talking shop and also crisis support line at night, so that people can contact someone to get that support. And another finding that came out of my findings of the research is digital support. with COVID, so many people decided to rely on digital, the technologies, so that they can get the support and the counseling service from the comfort of their home, and whenever they like. And that has actually reduced stigma, because people don't have to come out and go to a community center or a hospital to get the actual support, but they can talk to someone over the phone or through Teams or Zoom to get that support. And that was, I believe, one of the biggest findings of that research that came out. And so the community support is really, really important. That is, and another one was around empowering the service users and the communities. And empowering means providing that opportunities for people with mental health to come out and get involved in some training programs, and also improve their skills so that they are job ready, because most of the people think they might not be able to go back to job because of the mental health issues, and again, the stigma within the workplace. So hence that educational support was really, really important for them to have that confidence in them. So, and this is what I hear all the time in the community when I organize events. So even the mental health first aid training and the counseling support, the people have requested to me within the community. When I decided to organize that through my charity, none of those people from the community who wanted that training wanted to take up that training because of the stigma, because they knew they are going to be part of this group of people who will know they are going through mental health issues. So, and I have to approach them individually to find out, you were the one who requested for this training, but you're not taking it up. But because of the stigma, they didn't want it. So what we did was, we, in the flyer or the promotional documents we have distributed within the community, we have included the counselors, the mental health counselors' details, so that they can contact them directly, because all these events are free. And when our charity organize events, all of them are free because we get support from outside organizations. So we have included those information of the counselors in the flyer or in the promotional document, so that they can approach them directly and get that treatment and get that support. So, stigma has a harmful impact for people with mental health issues, and we really have to encourage people to come out and be part of the community support that is available for them, so that we can continue to talk. And we just have to look around, us, and see what kind of support we can provide for these people.
You've indeed covered a lot in your answer. And I do remember when Prince William set up, or the royals set up, a mental health charity here in the UK about 3 years ago. He mentioned that there was nobody who wanted, no leaders, no CEOs, no stars, no personalities, but wanted to be attached to the charity just because of the stigma. But moving on to Dr. Dar, and Manju touched on this. My question for you, and I think it's quite a good segue again. Technology and its global advance must be included when looking at any aspect of the world today. How do you suggest we use technology to improve access to mental health services in rural areas as well as cities?
Thank you for inviting me. And I've learned a hell of a lot already in the last half an hour. It's a big question, technology. Actually, it's already been brought up. No way I can answer this in 3 minutes. But I looked at my notes and I was thinking that what we heard, maybe we step back a bit and think about where we're at the moment. COVID happened, and I was involved with COVID, long COVID in the NHS. COVID happened, we were isolated, we were scared of pathology, but we also had this boom of technology. So we woke up to a world that is completely different. And the speed at which technology is developing, it's encapsulating our lives. We can't really avoid it. So I think this is a good time at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of products out there. There's huge interest in what can be developed. But this is a good time in which we can pause and look at the relationship between technology and mental health. And what role does technology play in mental health and vice versa? So the real task now is how do we get the balance correct? We know, we're seeing it now. When you talk about mental health, I've been the clinical director here. I was in Greenwich, in fact. Oxford is my trust. So I know this patch very well. And we, even then, when we're talking 10 years ago, we thought about online consultations. It didn't take off particularly. And it was always the Cinderella subject, psychiatry and psychology. And now suddenly it's everywhere. Mental health awareness is so big. We're now seeing the impact. We are seeing it clinically, the impact of the environment, which now includes technology. We eat, we sleep, we go to work, and we use technology. And some of the data that's coming out in terms of the usage levels is very, very high. So I think now we need to look at these products, we need to optimize them, so that we look at two bits. We look at, and everyone said, I'm a neurobiologist actually, really, that's what I do. I convert that to symptoms and treatments. We look at how technology now can improve mental well-being. So how can it enhance that prevention bit? The environment it creates, the tools it has, and then we also obviously look at how technology enables treatment to happen. So I would say we divide into two. We've got technology is an enabler, that's what it's meant to be, but it's also a very powerful influencer. So you have those two categories of effect. We look at enablement. I would say now at this point in time, we've probably got technology that will cover everything from psychoeducation, in terms of what you access on the internet, to symptom checkers, to diagnostics even, online consultations, online support, therapy, and even now, I'm interested in AI. The emergence of AI will mean that there will be data that is used to understand what the answer to a question should be. So we're merging to that field. Now, I think there is definitely a need for there to be regulation. There needs to be clinical validity to all of these technologies. The public is now a consumer. So normally if you get mental health support, it is delivered via a service or professionals. Now you can access it directly as a consumer. So there needs to be clinical validity, there needs to be regulation, there needs to be some standardization of those processes. And I think, as you said, access to rural areas, absolutely correct. I mean, we are seeing that happening anyway, even in the UK. Again, a twist on technology is that, as we've said, look, in rural areas, in my experience over the years, is I often see mental health as being better. So it's actually, there's what we can learn for those communities within the cities. Cities full of pressure, there's lots of multitasking, there's lots of expectations. So again, it's about how do we use technology in the right way in different settings. And I will touch on this final bit, which is a technology as an influencer, because it's all on our minds. Again, I think that technology will evolve, it should evolve, it's up to us to embrace it and shape it and make it influential in a positive way. Yeah, so influential in a positive way, I mean, again, is what can we learn from each other? We've talked about meditation, we've talked about, I mean, it's interesting that online virtual yoga is really, my wife does it every day now. So the access to these techniques is really important. The downside, obviously, is that it's, how do I put this sensitively? I mean, you can't really stop people being influenced on social media, on any technology now. So, oh gosh, no. That's my wife calling, which is so you can't stop that, because that's the freedom of the likes, and people want followers, they want huge numbers of ticks or whatever it is. But I do think we need to make sure that we have safeguards. And finally, obviously, the usage. Swami also mentioned that the usage is important, because if you look at your iPhone, you're using it for hours. There's an opportunity cost with that. I would like to see that being used very effectively in terms of what we need, personalized care. And then obviously, as a psychiatrist, there is always an addiction element to anything that gives you an instant response. That's what the frontal lobe of the brain does. So if you get an instant response, you're more likely to seek it out again. So we're into the realms of then young people now finding it very hard to get off their phones or whatever technology it is. So there's plenty to talk about this subject, but I'll pause.
Thank you, Dr. Dale. I have to say, when I wrote the question, I didn't even consider the UK had rural areas, but you're absolutely right. Moving to look at a particular group and their challenges, Kamal. We know there is a problem, a global challenge with mental health across all ages and cultures. Given your experience, what are the specific links between mental health and SEND? And just as a reminder, SEND, specialist educational needs, and in this case, disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a very broad spectrum of the population that we consider under the banner that is known in England to be SEND. And the 15.5% reference that we heard right at the beginning is an accurate one for those who are identified, but when we look at those who haven't necessarily had their needs identified or fall under a slightly different category or terminology, we're generally looking at about 20% of children and young people falling into this section of either neurodiversity or physical disability. The language around this is quite difficult. You know, we have some positions which see the use of the word disability as offensive, but then we have some positions which see that actually labeling and determining needs as they are makes them part of a core identity, and then they can be met and addressed. So if we slightly put the language aside for a moment, in England, social, emotional, and mental health is one of the 4 broad areas of need for special educational needs and disabilities. So it's already sitting within that category. However, when it sits in that category, it's under the form of an illness or a diagnosis that has been formally recognised. And then alongside that, we have mental health and the spectrum of mental health that children and young people experience over the course of their youth. And that can sit both within this category of special educational needs and disabilities in those 4 broad areas of needs that are covered under legislation, or it can sit alongside it. And more often than not, they are dealt with hand in hand, because the mental ill health is a symptom or a visible outcome of wider needs that are being unmet. But the position of mental health alongside special educational needs is quite unique in England. Not all governments, in fact, very few governments have mental health sitting in this area in a formally recognised way. And often those with special educational needs and or disabilities have mental health needs that are not addressed because of the lack of integrated connection between education, health, social care, and the holistic view of development. So again, context specific, there's huge overlap, but it's often unrecognised. When I asked my daughter, who's already been mentioned, what she would say on this panel, she said that it's so important at our school. Mental health is the most important thing. There are assemblies on it all the time. We're always given strategies about it. And if you're physically unwell, then you will be mentally unwell, and vice versa. I've said it less eloquently than she did, but I've tried to capture in a snapshot the integral link between physical and mental health, and how that are coming up to 20% of our children and young people are facing challenges with this on a daily basis. And coming back to the idea of children with neurodiverse diagnoses, we must consider the impact that being what some may call atypical or neurodiverse must have on social position, friendships, a sense of belonging in the school community. Now, we know that some schools do this really well, but we know that the majority of stakeholders, the people who are receiving services for special educational needs and disabilities, are deeply unsatisfied in England, and not to say in other countries that it is too dissimilar. So there's huge work to be done for children and young people, but it brings us back to that key point that when considering mental health, we're considering the whole population from the earliest of years. And we had the reference to children or people being born with different ways of understanding and different needs. And schools are seeing this, parents are feeling this every day. So the link that is there is an important one that needs to continually be called out, like you're doing here today, by including school-age children, early years children, in concept right at the beginning of the discussion, but in design through the development of policy thought leadership.
So, because that was such a good answer, Kamal, what does a global mental health policy need to include for the SEND population in particular? If you were to draw out just a few particular items we can make recommendations for.
Absolutely. So we're told, and I also believe, that true inclusivity can only be achieved when considering all different stakeholders in society together. But there's a danger to this in that if we're considering inclusivity and in its whole, we can overlook certain sectors of society where there will be a greater need. And special educational needs and disability, children and young people fall into a category of greater vulnerability in this area. So recognizing, first of all, the higher likelihood of mental ill health of those who have pre-existing vulnerabilities due to special educational needs and disabilities is a first key step, and recognizing other vulnerable stakeholders or members of society in that policy process is a key step. At the same time, as I briefly touched upon, recognizing the full age spectrum in the response to a plan for mental health. And by the same token, considering that to achieve this, there needs to be a systematic and strategic approach to developing a cultural inclusion as opposed to addressing single stigmas one by one. In the same way that we're looking at inclusivity as a whole, we can accept that many of the social stigmas for disability and wider needs carry over across to mental health and vice versa. So building upwards from a culture of inclusion and trying to establish that will and should naturally help dissipate the stigmas that we've discussed and we've heard about. So looking at how a policy can support the development of a global culture of inclusion is a critical key phase, in my opinion. It's not an easy answer, but it is blue sky thinking.
Thank you. And Dr. Morgan, on a related note, Amma says that love is the only medicine that can heal your heart. And it is also said elsewhere that it takes a village to raise a child. In today's world, where we are more connected to technology, but more isolated and disconnected, more lonely than ever before, what do we need to do more of to support children's mental health?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a wonderful quote from Amma, and I think it's been wonderful to hear about how much people are thinking about the early years and actually children and babies, the initial experiences of the world, and how critical love is for that experience. And we're now seeing quite a lot of neuroscience research coming out showing the impact of love and affection on babies' development in those first few years. So, for example, a recent book is called Why Love Matters, How Affection Shapes the Baby's Brain. And it collects different research and studies that show the wide-ranging effects on neural development and on nervous systems as well, and how much those are supported by affectionate caregiving responses from carers. We know as well from neuroscience research from researchers such as Jaak Panksepp that loving and playful interactions between caregivers and children actually activate soothing neurochemical systems and hormones. And so it's really very much in the science, it's in the research that love is probably the most important thing. The second quote you mentioned, it takes a village to raise a child, I think highlights how important it is that love and care happens at a whole range of levels. So there can be a real onus on parents in particular that the responsibility of their children's mental health is purely on them. And as we've spoken about today, how much stigma that can carry with that if a parent feels their community is aware of their child having mental health needs. But actually, we know again from research that children's mental health relates to a whole range of factors and extends well beyond their kind of individual and their family experiences. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about a recent large-scale research project between UCL and the Anna Freud Centre. It's called the Head Start Programme, and it has actually looked at 250,000 young people across the UK in 6 different areas. And it found that one of the main key protective factors was having multiple and trusted sources of support. And those would be from family, community, and school, and well beyond that as well. So it's just to really highlight that love and care for our young people and children needs to come well beyond families. And how that looks in terms of your kind of question around practical strategies and policy, is that what they found was effective was, in addition to one-to-one counselling and mentoring programs, that it was really key for professionals working with children and young people to have further training on mental health. And for this kind of community-wide and actually society-wide discussion to be happening, especially for the people in those really kind of child-facing roles, to have an awareness of how to respond and react when they're faced with mental health challenges in children. Because, of course, it's not at the moment that a child might see a particular professional that mental health difficulty might emerge. It's actually in our everyday lives, coming up against real challenges. So yeah, really kind of that level of support is really key, as well as they found community-based support, so creative projects, sports projects, being able to take part in residential, days out and trips and everything really supported resilience. And I think if we go back to actually the first point, which was made around resilience and where does that come from? You were talking, Emma, so nicely about how we sort of have this idea that certain challenging emotions are bad or not meant to happen, or we don't know what to do with them. And I think as adults, sometimes we can find it hard to respond when we see a child in distress, maybe more so than ever if it's your own child. And so holding that can be very difficult, but sometimes that avoidance can subconsciously teach the message that it's not right, that we don't want to see those emotions in children. But actually going back to, again, the unconditional love, really we want that to extend to emotions. And, we want to be giving children the message that any emotion they feel, we can unconditionally accept, and they can unconditionally accept. And from there, I think we can really move forwards with them and build on all those teaching and strategies that people have talked about already. I just lastly wanted to mention a couple of, kind of main strategies or things which are happening in the UK. So there's a very large mindfulness in schools project. And as you were saying earlier, schools can very much vary. It's wonderful to hear about your daughter's school. Practice can vary enormously in schools and in different individuals' responses to mental health as well. So things like the Mindfulness in Schools project, which is giving children opportunities on a daily basis in a kind of non-stigmatized way to experience meditation is really having a wonderful impact in the UK.
Thank you, Dr. Hannah. It's a big subject. And we've touched on love, we've touched on villages, we've touched on technology. But Dr. Dar, what about the commissioning of services? Do you think it is actually possible to develop a global, adaptable and adoptable framework on how mental health services are commissioned?
Thank you.
Another hour, I know.
It should be. That's the easy answer. I couldn't give you my view as a commissioner from the past, and also as a person who is on the front line and sees all these developments. I mean, commissioning is all about knowing your resources, allocating resources, but then also, which is the key bit, which applies in business as well, is getting capabilities from that. So that's the key, is knowing how you can turn a resource into capability. So commissioning, it always goes central, it always goes big, it becomes very complex in terms of macroeconomics and all of that stuff. But in my experience of you have to have commissioners based on what the local need is. And how you tap into that in any society will vary. I mean, that's the beauty of the world. I mean, I heard the lovely quote of One Health, which ties into what I said about technology as well. Technology is there's one technology as well. So when we commission now, there is the idea, obviously, that we're all experiencing the same things, but also there's this very local experience. The second thing, so that has to be in. There has to be ways of using frameworks that are generic, that are global, but also adapting them to allow that local expertise, the local experience as well. And that's perhaps where technology can come in. Then the second thing is, which again, I'm just giving my view here after many years, is commissioning has to be objective and independent, okay? So you're covering the full spectrum from well-being and developing that resilience internally to those who are struggling with mental health problems and need help. And in some societies, the well-being bit is done very well, and therefore those societies, commissioners can learn from that. And then there's the other side, which is actually where there's a lot of support in terms of mental health services, which is more focused on outcomes and treatment, perhaps not focused on mental well-being so much. So we can distribute that knowledge over to those areas where it still is very stigmatized. If there is an approach about building equipment to stay resilient, sometimes also then if someone has a problem with their mental health, they can't access help because it's too dangerous, it's too psychologically risky. So that's the second point. The commissioners have to be independent. They have to look at, if there's an emphasis in one area, one thing, they've got to make sure they've covered all other areas. And that's the last point in a way, is that you can, now the great opportunity for us all is to information share. I mean, there is literally thousands of models out there. If somebody wanted me to talk about ADHD in London, that would offer insights into another city. We know 5% of the population, 5 to 8% have it all over the world. So again, we have the neurobiological and the epidemiological data to say that wherever you are in the world, you will have individuals with these issues. And likewise, we know that every human being has the capacity to self-regulate. And that's what we've been talking about today. That is not really tapped into, because we are focusing on looking back and rewiring stuff, but actually we all have that ability. We need struggles to build resilience. So it's not the avoidance of struggles, we need a struggle to get through it. So I think there's those 3 areas of commissioning, and I do think, yes, there can be frameworks that can definitely be useful everywhere, but that have to be adapted.
Thank you, and it almost takes us back to where we started on resilience. I'm going to try and pack in another 2 questions before opening up to the audience. So Emma, what do you suggest of the forgotten ideas of well-being? And by that, I mean good, healthy strategies for mental health that we should apply to our world today, paving the way for future generations.
I genuinely believe that we've got very lost. I think that there are amazing developments that has just been noted regarding opportunities because of technology and connection and the underpinning and understanding of what that means. But I think that we have a lot of our answers, and you actually said something that I think is really profound and is often missed, which is very often we look where the problems are, we don't look where the problems are not. And throughout the world, we have evidence that there are places where mental health, and it's not that mental health isn't recognised, mental illness isn't recognised, it's that it genuinely statistically, in comparison to particularly places like the UK and America, is minute in detail. And when you look at the bedfellows of why, it comes down to quite a pure experience, which is first of all spirituality. And I think that people can get confused, particularly when I work with individuals and I bring up spirituality, because I think that they immediately think I'm talking about religion. And obviously that can be stigmatizing for people. They don't want to belong to a religion, but helping them to understand that spirituality can be in nature, it can be in community, it can be in family. It's wherever you find that fulfillment. So I think that is one of the most missing facets in our world. And part of that comes down to a narrative that says, if there was a God or a higher power, life would be good, as if there is some kind of eternal promise that there can only ever be something of meaning outside of ourselves if our life is fabulous, as opposed to realizing that that's the very hook that we place our faith in, that when things are hard, we'll be cradled through it, not that we'll be avoidant of it. And then diet, nutrition, exercise, we absolutely know the way that's impacted on our brains. So we can literally see it on brain scans, the way that a diet impacts on us. And yet, unfortunately, and maybe there's always an elephant in the room to some degree, there are some very dark forces, in my opinion, that contradict reality. So food corporations, government incentives that actually permit and drive things that are bad for us. So if we look at good nutrition, good diet, a connection in something greater than you, a belief that you have the resources within you to find the energy to move past the obstacles, and then to reclaim the knowledge of that experience and to own it and to feel empowered by it. And then on top of that, to really think about purpose and responsibility, in a sense that you have to be responsible, both to yourself and others, to really feel that life is worth living. And I think that if we were to genuinely concentrate our efforts in those areas, even when you were mentally ill, and you know there are things like schizophrenia, there are issues with psychosis, I lost my father to it, these exist. We're not going to just eradicate them by being part of a greater community. But I tell you what, we lessen the pain, we lessen the burden, we lessen the stigma, we increase the love, and we make everybody feel that as odd as they are, because everybody in this room, you're all odd. All of you. It's what makes you beautiful. It's the idiosyncrasies of every individual. I'm strange, but I'm embracing that, and I love that about me. I don't want to be a homogenous lump of people on TikTok wanting to belong to the DID community, which is what we're seeing more and more, people desperate to belong. And if that means belonging to a place where there is a fracture in our foundation, well, that's better than being alone. So I think that we have the knowledge we need. It's now, as is noted, taking that forward with things like digital connectivity in a positive, progressive, helpful way, and also being honest about the trust problems that we have, particularly in the Western world right now, with the very people that we believed we could trust to lead us. And I think the fractures for children in particular have been devastating. So there's a healing process that needs to go through. And people need to start telling the truth, even if it offends. I think that would help as well.
Well, on the subject of telling the truth, we love your strangeness. Interesting how community has come up time and time again in this panel, and it's something we at Bromley know well, the strength of community and being together. I think my last question for the panel before we move to the audience is for Dr. Manju, and it touches again on a similar vein, that human energy of connection, intergenerational conversations and communication. What's your sense of the difference it can make to improving mental health outcomes?
So again, that is an activity that the charity has started. So 3 years ago, the charity decided to organize intergenerational care events in the community. So we all know about Black History Month. So we have to share the importance of tackling the inequalities that exist within the Black community, and that is why we raise awareness during that month. So during Black History Month, we took some elders from Croydon BME Forum, that's Black and Minority Ethnic Forum, to a local college, the local John Ruskin College, to their hair and beauty salon and spa for this different experience. So we had a number of people signed up, and we took them to the college, and the importance was, when those beauty treatments were taking place, these elders should be sharing the stories of the culture difference and what they went through in their lives, and why it is important to tackle and address the issues of the inequalities that's happening within the communities. And what really happened was, during the session, they were very happily getting the treatment, and they didn't want to talk about Black History Month. They wanted to find out how to keep their nails healthy, what's the best way to style their hair, and what kind of makeup should treat their skins. Those are the kind of advice they wanted from the young people. But it was really funny, and the young people loved it because they wanted to share the knowledge with those elders, because that's what they are lacking as well. The elders were lacking. So then the following year, so this started 3 years ago, the following year we decided to have a special Q&A session so that the young people can actually ask those questions to the elders, and that was really useful. But so what came out, and we do regular feedback and surveys with the attendees of all these events to understand how we can improve the services that we are providing to the local community. And what actually came out was, and even the Dementia Cafe I mentioned in my previous response, again, we bring the students of the health and social care students to the Dementia Cafe, because the problem with some of the colleges and the universities is they are not getting the real life experience from the people who have dementia or going through mental health issues. So hence that intergenerational care or that support was really important for that health and social care students to see what the people with dementia were going through, what the carers are going through, what kind of support are needed, so that when they finish the course and go back to the real experience of treating the real patients, they know what to expect. And finally, I just wanted to mention about the importance it will bring. So obviously, it boosts the confidence, improve the communication, and increase the memory. So those are the benefits of the intergenerational care that came out of the research. And also, from what I have seen from the events that we organize through the charity, it definitely give an opportunity to learn from each other and improve the confidence, and also boost the confidence between the people. And sometimes there are stigma between the different generations. So it has actually reduced the stigma that took place between those generations, because young people thought, the seniors might not be that approachable for them to go to and talk to them, but that perception has changed. Again, because of the issues that we have seen in the news and the media about the crime and antisocial behavior, the elders had a different perception for the young people, and that has actually changed after those kind of sessions. And for some young people, they didn't have any grandparents, so that gave them that opportunity to learn about that. Gave them that opportunity to understand, what is the life having the grandparents and the benefits. And they also learned about caring the elders, because some of them, they didn't know how to care the elders. And for the elders, it was all about tackling the social isolation and also the loneliness. And some of the charities are tackling, like Age UK and other charities, but then they have the elders have been experiencing that, and with that intergenerational care sessions, they learned how they can tackle those issues. And also sense of belonging, that is something they have definitely learned from each other, and have to boost that confidence between each other. So those are the benefits that I have seen personally from those intergenerational care sessions, and that these are the findings that's coming out of some of those research as well.
So before we move to the Q&A with the audience, and I think there are some questions, I feel it would be remiss of me, Kamal, to not ask if your young daughter would like to say a few words. Not now? Yes, she was all enthusiastic before. Well, we'll ask you again later. Okay, so for the panel, any questions in the audience? And we have Carmini over there. Have we got a mic?
Hello, I'm a teacher for 23 years. So since COVID, pandemic, and during that period of time, so one of the things I've noticed and witnessed amazingly is the amount of children who are developing anxiety. And we talk about mental health and good mental health, and we don't give them enough practice. We don't show them how. So my great concerns are not only is it sort of affecting their well-being, it's how they actually sort of participate in school, how they socialise, and the number of kids who are becoming school refusers. So, and I've seen that a lot with students with neurodiversity, and that's my big concern, because this is an ongoing situation that's going to go balloon outwards. So first, advice to teachers, parents, and
teacher myself. The organisation that I'm representing today has 80,000 teachers as members in over, I think, 85% of schools in England. And the issues that you have mentioned there are ones that we hear time and time again across the piece. Obviously, we can recognise the impact of COVID on the mental health of children and young people, but one key issue that teachers and all stakeholders are facing is related to the lack of expertise. So we know that there are not enough trained professionals to cater to the needs of children and young people, so teachers are being called in as first port of call, and teachers are not always necessarily willing in the first instance, which it can be a shocking thing to hear, not willing, because of their own lack of confidence or lack of training or expertise in the area. So we've heard the mention of mental health first aid training, but that's something that's not widely mandated. Not all schools have mental health first aiders. We don't have a school nurse culture anymore, so there isn't necessarily the medicalisation of it. And we have had the change in the way that the local offer available to schools is formulated. So there's some confusion on the ground about who to go to first for support. If you're an adult who's trying to support a child with mental health or special educational needs. And there are some really clear answers in recognition that the whole system is strained. And the first is that schools have a responsibility, a legal statutory responsibility to support children with mental health needs, as that falls under SEND. And the first port of call to take that responsibility is the class teacher. This class teacher, if they're unable to provide the actual strategies and support, needs to escalate that to the SENCO and involve the parents in that process. But simultaneously, parents can involve their own medical professionals and go to the GP, and that's the part that's often overlooked by the teachers that we hear from, in that the parents don't necessarily know they can go down the health route and they're waiting for school to take action. And this is one of the problems that's created by the wonderful, and I don't say that sarcastically, the actually wonderful integrated education, health and social care system that we have in England, because by bringing them all together, we have got the opportunity to have a really integrated, holistic approach to care, but it can create some confusion at ground level about who starts the process off and where to go. So advice to teachers is core at the first level, influence your school leaders to get training and make it available to all of those student-facing practitioners, whether they're teachers or learning support staff. The second is to make sure that you have clear communication with parents as far and as often as possible to support them, because what you're seeing at school will only be a tiny example of what they're experiencing at home. And then finally, accept that we actually do live in a very rich society of knowledge that's available and that has been freely produced by organizations like Mind, Anna Freud Foundation, NASON, who I represent, and there's freely accessible material to upskill ourselves as professionals and also future generations. But as we've got influencers and policymakers probably listening in somewhere as well, I think expertise is something that we need to look at in the long term. There is, I was speaking to an international development expert in a global south country that I will not name, and that very large country has 4 education psychologists for the whole country. And that's the reality in many parts of the world. So we know resource is strained, so we need to build up resource and expertise at a professional level, and in the interim, professionalize ourselves at the front line.
Thank you very much. My question is around how mental health plays alongside what a lot of young people are engaged in, or a lot of people of every age engaged in, protest and protest culture. There seem certain elements of the two which are quite incompatible, particularly when we're thinking about deliberately working with an explosive and fiery energy of rage and anger. How can the two come into conversation?
You're working. It's such an interesting question. I mean, I think it kind of comes back to what we were saying about what do we do with these really challenging emotions. And I suppose children and young people are finding all sorts of different ways to channel those in this context where perhaps it's not always okay and accepted to speak about it, where there is a lot of stigma. And also I think coming back to the point around children being quite isolated, particularly those children who are not attending school and the increasing numbers of kind of school refusers that we've got in schools. So yeah, it does make me think about what channels there are for children and young people to do something with that energy. But I really liked, Swami, your ABCD, and I think that can be useful for all of us and for children. I think it sort of relates as well to the COVID, in that pandemic time, us as well as adults, we had a real lack of structure in our lives. And I think children were at home seeing that lack of structure, seeing that lack of being able to put their energy into something, feel valued and kind of feel engaged in different kind of activities. And it's kind of left us a bit lost as adults and as children. And I think where in some families, perhaps for all sorts of different reasons, that structure has not been rebuilt since COVID. So there are a lot of families who, there's still a lot of working from home, but there's also a lot of people out of work. And I think children in those contexts do lack that structure and that kind of, different possibilities for engaging in something that feels meaningful and where they can express all sorts of different experiences that they have, be that anger with the world. And this is a really challenging context for them to be growing up in, and there's a lot for them to protest about.
Is that on? Yeah. So as somebody who was a hunt saboteur and an animal rights protester, and I protested every single time throughout COVID because I felt it was reprehensible that we would lock children up with their abusers, for example. I spent a lot of time developing through the protesting ranks, and when you're young, you follow. So I think that one of the things that connected me when I was a child and out there shouting and moaning was that others were doing it, and it felt like that was a way of belonging. And then as I got older, I realised how fundamentally flawed that is, because anger's great to express something, but it's very rarely going to get you what you want, because kindness is the thing that really changes the facets of those parts of ourselves that really needs an outlet. I also think it kind of cross-sections quite a lot onto what's just been talked about, where young people are growing up with almost a lack of individuality, because they're terrified of being an individual. My goodness, the baiting, the attacks for daring to be different, for daring to say, I don't agree. They are literally bolted down from every single area, from school, from social media, from the MSN, telling them this is how you should be. And if you're not that, you are not somebody who we believe is a valid human being. So to follow a crowd feels safer. Ultimately, it's disastrous and it's devastating. And then on top of that, we have fundamentally the voices telling them the world's going to end. Everything's a disaster. It's a lie. The world will be fine, to be fair, without us. But we tell them this, so they grow up anxious. And then they had COVID, probably the biggest awakener for anybody working in mental health, because we've seen the impact in such a quick succession of the diabolical results. And what we did, we said, well, you don't have to go to work anymore. And then we wonder why kids don't want to go to school. We have an internet system, and I did research on this because it's something that blows my mind, because I worked in safeguarding for 15 years with young people. Children are my area. So I searched one day, I am sad. It took me 3 pages to get a return on sad, because every other return said depressed. I'm nervous. Everybody told me online I'm anxious. These are fundamentally normal experiences. It isn't the teacher's job to teach children how to manage and self-soothe, but fundamentally, as parents and as a society, and because teachers are sometimes the first line of defense, I think it's paramount that we start having a real conversation, which is, these are normal feelings. You've learned some really bad coping strategies and mechanisms that we adults have told you, and now why don't you sit and feel, and then through the deconstruction of those feelings, applying things like mindfulness, relaxation, telling your teacher you're having a bad day, talking to your mates and running around the playground, it will be soothed. But what we do is we fix it. You're depressed, you're anxious. And so what we see in the protests is an opportunity to express discontent with a permission ground of gratification by others stroking you for doing so, without ever fundamentally getting to the heart of the problem, which is to be a unique person thriving in this world, irrespective of what other people think of you.
Yes, just a quick. I mean, this is a really important issue for me. This is the second COVID, actually. So we're seeing school kids definitely struggling, but school life has always been difficult. We're seeing a transition into adulthood that isn't necessarily being picked up on. So the school issue is there, but then what's an adult now, 18, 19, 20? I think a lot of this is, I mean, as you said, it's about developing resilience, coping, but it's a lot about self-worth. Where does a young person see themselves fitting in the world now? It's not the world we've shaped, because we lived in a different world when we were young. And I remember sport and all these things. So I think that's where it is psychological skills, but it's also psychological skills in relation to what you're coping with and what you imagine the world to be around you. And as you get into adulthood, university, again, the whole online thing, I do wonder whether they're getting those real experiences they need to feel like there's a purpose.
I hope this is on a lighter note. Listening to Right Honourable Bob Stewart earlier, and one of the panel members who said that we're all strange in our own ways, Carl Jung famously once said, "Bring me a sane man and I shall cure him for you."
I think that's all we have time for, or should we? Oh, you have to leave also. So it's been a great discussion, one I know we hope will continue in homes and meeting rooms and government institutions across the world. Thanks to all the panelists and our wonderful technical and sound team for everything today, and everybody working behind the scenes for this event. I'm now going to ask Swami Shubhamnitananda to step forward, and he'll present each of you with a personal token of his thanks, starting with our MP, Bob Stewart. It's like Christmas, do step forward. Emma? Councillor Manju? Dr. Dad? Come on. And Hannah. And thank you to our wonderful audience.
I would also like to add one more thing. Thank you so much, Shalini, for doing such a wonderful job today, for being such a great moderator to the panel. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. And I really feel that we could share a lot of things. I'm sure we had more questions, but surely, after this, hopefully we'll have more opportunities to talk about this topic. As said, it's like an ocean. You don't know where to start, and it just keeps going. But hopefully we'll be able to take the right things. This panel had so many facets of mental health discussed, so we'll be able to go through it and get things into the policy document, and hope we'll be able to progress in dealing with this decline in mental health in an effective way. And let's hope that the future is where mental health improves and we find everybody peaceful, happy and loving. Thank you so much for being here in Amriteshwari. We just would request 2 minutes. We would like to have a group photo with the panelists here on stage.
Thank you. We will serve lunch outside shortly.
Amma Parameshwari, Jai Jai Hey Amma, Amma Parameshwari, Sharare, Sananda Sagare, Saranambike, Anandame, Harama, Kripakarama, Dayakarama, Amriteshwari, Hey Amma, Amba Parameshwari, Jai Jai Hey Amma, Amba Parameshwari.
जगदोद्धारिणि माता जय जय जगजननी जनपा